I equals PRT. So each of these letters represents something specific. The I stands for interest earned or paid. The P stands for principal, which is the initial amount that is put into an account or borrowed. And this is multiplied times our rate at which the interest is accruing. And our T stands for time. And this always has to be in years. So as we move forward, we're going to be looking at this formula today. So a big thing about interest is that it has a huge role in our economy, and it can be a huge role in the positive realm and in the negative realm. So hopefully as we go through this that we can see when it is a good thing or when it is a bad thing. So we're going to look at this today and kind of break down each of our formulas and be able to substitute them and simplify them accordingly. So in this problem, we have some given values. We have the principal amount given, we have a rate given, and we have a time. So we talked about earlier each of these letters in our formula correspond with each of these given values. So what we're going to do with them, and it would probably be helpful to have a piece of paper near you so you can work alongside me as I take my numbers and substitute them into their proper place. So we don't have an interest, so that I is going to stay there. But we do have a principal amount, so that P is going to stand for principal, and they told us that that is $600. So, and I'm going to use parentheses to identify or multiplication. So I have a principal amount of $600, and I'm going to multiply that times my rate of 4%. And what's important to remember is whenever you see a percent, you're going to divide by 100 because a part out of a whole. So we have 4% divided by 100 equals 0.04. Another way you could look at it is taking your decimal place and moving it 2 places to the left. So either way you look at it, you get the correct answer. So that is the value that I want to put there. And our last, since we already have years, we can put that 2 right into our formula. So from there, we will take our calculator and multiply those numbers. So let me get my calculator. So we have, now I already forgot my numbers, 600 times 0.04 times 2, 600 times 0.04 times 2, and that will give us 48. So the interest earned on our principal amount of $600 at 4% rate interest gives us $48. So from there, we know that we earned $48 on top of our $600. So in the end, our ending balance is going to be 48, which are interest, plus our 600, which will put us at $648 in our account. So depending on what they're asking for, if they just ask for interest, this is your answer. But if they're asking for an ending balance, you have to add that back to your principal amount. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to try. So as we look at this next slide, it will show us our two answers. So again, this was our interest earned, and then this here is your ending balance or your total. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to solve for both of these as we go through. So here we have a principal amount of $640, a rate of 3.25%, and a time of 2 years. So we have the same formula that we're looking at. So we're going to substitute these accordingly. So we have a principal amount of $640 times a rate, again remembering that we have to take that decimal and move it 2 places to the left before we put it in our formula, and our time of 2 years. So go ahead and get that into your calculator and see what you get as your answer. All right, and then now that you've gotten your interest answer, what did you get for your total answer? So your total amount at the end. So hopefully you ended at these two numbers. So we have an interest of $41.60, and our total balance at the end is $681.60. All right, let's try 2 more. Okay, this one here, we have a principal amount of, so I'm going to go ahead and substitute the numbers that I know. So we have $855 times, again, we're going to take that decimal and move it 2 places to the left, 1, 2, because we divide by 100. So we have 0.0675 as our rate, and our time is 3 1/4 years. So you could do one of two things. You could know that 1/4 equals 0.25, and then that leaves us at 3.25 years, and that is what I would go ahead and do. You could also leave it in the fraction form, and you could put that into your calculator, but I personally think that turning it to a decimal is the easiest way. So go ahead and solve for your interest and your total amounts. So we should have landed somewhere like this, 187.57 as our interest, and 1,042.57 as our total. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We're just multiplying. We're taking the information that they're giving us at the time and multiplying across. But sometimes, I'm going to skip a few of these examples. Sometimes they will give us something that looks a little bit different. So this instance, we still have a principal. We still have a principal, we still have a rate, and we still have a time. But remember what I said at the beginning, the time always has to be in years. So in order to take this amount and turn it into years, we're going to have to do one extra step before we substitute. So I'm going to go ahead and substitute the things that I do know. So I know that my principal amount is $565. And I'm going to multiply that times my rate, again, remembering that I have to move my decimal point 2 times to the left or divide by 100 before I put it into my formula. And then as I go to the last thing, I have 8 months. That has to be in years. So what I would recommend doing is dividing that 8 months by 12 months, since there are 12 months in a year. So that is what you'll always want to do. You will always divide your months by years. If you're given months, you have to divide that by 12 months in order to convert it to years. So then from there, we can solve for our interest, and we can also solve for our total. So again, the total is going to be what you get for your interest plus your principal amount. That will be your total amount. All right. So we should have landed at 60.27 and as our interest, and our total amount is 625.27. So I'm going to skip a couple of things and I'm going to move here. So this formula so far has been pretty easy. We're just taking our principal and we're multiplying it times our rate and multiplying it times our time. And then being able to calculate our interest and our total amounts at the end. But sometimes they're going to give you certain examples like this. They will give you something like, the interest that you earned is $650. But then, and they tell you that the rate is 1.7%, and your time is 2 years. And then you're going to say, but they didn't give me the correct things to put in my formula. So this is where your formula substitute solve comes really in handy. So I'm going to keep my formula substitute solve as I go on this yellow. So our formula is still I equals PRT. That didn't change. But when we get to our substitution, rather than substituting we're just going to take the numbers that we get accordingly. So we know that our interest is $650. Our principal is, we're just going to leave a P for principal. Our rate, again, we're going to move that decimal point, 0.017, and our time is going to be 2 years. So this looks a little bit different, and I hope that you're thinking this looks doable. So the first step in solving this problem is we're going to take what we can multiply on the right side. We can multiply some stuff on the right side. And what is it that we can multiply on the right side? All right, hopefully you came up with that we could multiply 0.17 times 2. So I'm going to pull my calculator up. 0.17 times 2. We're going to get 0.34. So now we have P times 0.34 equals 650. And this is where hopefully the last step in solving equation comes up. And you can say that the inverse operation of multiplication is what? And hopefully you said division. So we're going to take both sides and divide by 0.34. So on the right side, that becomes 1, and we're just left with P equals, and then what we do is take our 650 interest, 650, and divide by 0.34. So what we get here is 1911.76. 1911.76. So that is your principal amount that you earned on, or the principal amount that you started with in this account. So if you notice, all we had to do differently was this little step here. So it's not a whole lot different, but sometimes they're going to ask you to rearrange the formula a little bit in order to find your answer. So we would be able to write in our principal 1911.76. That is the amount that you started with. Let me check that number first. All right. So now we're going to try one. We're going to try one here. Okay. So go ahead and take a moment to look at this. And go ahead and substitute your numbers up here accordingly into your formula. So hopefully that puts you at the interest is $365 equals your principal. Remember, we just leave that as a P. Our rate is going to be 0.024, and our time is going to be 3 years. Okay? So then just like on the last one, we are going to take this 3 and multiply it by the 0.024. I'm going to get my calculator out. So 3 times 0.024, and we get 0.072. So we have P times 0.072 equals 365. So then from there, in order to solve, we have to solve for P. What do we have to do? So we're going to have to take this 0.072 and divide both sides by 0.072. So once we simplify, we're going to get P equals $365 divided by 0.072. All right. So 365 divided by 0.072. So we're going to get 5,069.44. 5,069.44 as our principal amount. All right. And that was our interest that they gave us and our total that we solved, or our principal was 5,064, and so our total, when we add that principal back to our interest, is right there. All right, and I'm going to leave this up as your last problem to solve for. So substitute accordingly. We will substitute our 425 for our interest, our 3230 for our principal. We're going to keep our rate is unknown and our time is 6.5. And then I'm going to have you solve that last problem. So we're going to multiply these two together, and then whatever you get, whatever number you get, will go here, and then you're multiplying that times your rate, and then you'll take that number and divide both sides by it to get your final answer.